finally, when I told my mother that my dad had raped me when I was about 12, 13, I finally told her, and she didn't do a single thing. She told me that there's nothing we can do about it unless you want to go homeless, which of course at the time I'd rather be homeless because I was always afraid that my father was going to do it again.
Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybec.
For anyone out there that would like to be a guest on our show, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com. Just send us your story and we'll get back to you.
Today, we're speaking to a woman who reached out with a topic that we have never really heard discussed before. And the woman is a trauma and abuse survivor herself. And she reached out with the subject line, "I'm afraid I'll raise my baby boy into becoming a rapist/monster." So we're going to explore what it's like for her as a new mother to raise a boy after herself suffering at the hands of men throughout her life. So we've got the guest on the line, and thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, of course. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah. And, first of all, thank you for presenting this topic to us. We know that it's never easy to talk about any past trauma, and that, I'm sure it's also considered taboo for new mothers to talk about, fears around how their child may grow up. So thank you for reaching out and picking our platform to discuss this.
Yeah, actually, I haven't really heard much about this topic either. I think I've only met one other woman, and it was online, that felt the exact same way I did about this topic. But for the most part, I don't really hear about it. So, but I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah, no, that's never usually the case. We learned on this show. But I guess to be able to understand your fears and talk about your current journey with motherhood and these feelings, can you just share some of the personal trauma that you have experienced growing up that has led to this fear? And you can feel free to, go into as much or as little detail as you're comfortable with.
Yeah. So my trauma begins even before I was even born. Unfortunately, my mother is also a survivor and experienced a lot of trauma too, in the hands of men as well. I mean, same with women, but men. And it started really when I was born, and my mother so I have 4 other siblings. This might not make sense, but I have 4 other siblings, and I'm in the middle, and they all have the same dad except me. So my mom had an affair and had me with some random man. And he was deported back to Mexico. So I never really grew up knowing that I had a different dad. My brother's dad did stay with my mother after the affair and continued just fathering us. So he was who I saw as my father. I didn't know he wasn't until later on in life. But because of that, there was a lot of marital issues in their marriage because, the affair, and a lot of domestic violence, and from both my mom and my dad. And so my father was a very violent person. He was very just really abusive, and to us is what was normal. We were so used to this that I generally thought this is how you punished children. But there was times where he would hit us just for laughing. My mother would hit me just for laughing. They just had so much rage and anger. And my dad, I remember very specifically early on that he would hit me with the opposite end of a fly swatter, so the metal end, and would leave really bad welts on me. And I used to run to my mom hoping that she would stop him from this, and of course she wouldn't. And then around the age of 7, my mom went to jail again because of domestic violence. I can't remember exactly if this was the second or the first time she had gone to jail, but it was one of the times after some some abuse towards each other. I just forgot what it's called.
Oh, domestic abuse.
Mm-hmm. And while she was gone, I can't exactly remember how long she was gone for. It could have been weeks. It could have been months. My brain kind of has blocked a lot of this trauma out. But while she was gone, my father did end up assaulting me. Am I allowed to say the R word on here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. My father ended up raping me. And I think I was 7. I don't exactly know what age. I just know I was between like 5 and 8. So I was around that age, and he did rape me on every single night. And I remember one of those nights praying to God. Actually, it was like a really long day of playing with my siblings. I was so tired, and I went to bed, and I remember praying to him and asking him, like, could you just not tonight? Like, could you just stop him for tonight? Like, I'm so tired. I don't know if I'll be able to stay awake. Like, I'm just exhausted. Could I just please get some sleep? And it wasn't long until my father came in again. And I remember waking up that morning, and I was so disappointed. And not only like my father, but in God too, who, you know, for most people is a man. And I remember being like, what the hell? Like, what? I'm just 7 years old. Like, why didn't you answer my prayer? And that was really like the first time that I think I ever was truly, truly like devastated with you know, men just in general. Like I was always a super smart and aware kid. That's actually when I started questioning God too, and my faith and whether he existed or not. And if he did, I just clearly he's not a good man. So like I want nothing to do with it. And I can't remember the ages of when I was assaulted again by it's still really hard for me to say this because not like only like a few, like a couple of people know this, but I will like talk about it because I do believe that talking about your trauma helps you heal from it. But I was also assaulted by 2 of my siblings. The first one was one of the oldest ones. And my mom actually walked in on it one time. And of course she did nothing. My mother was also very abusive. So like her not doing anything was the least terrible thing she could do, really. And then later on in life, when I was about like 11, maybe even younger than that, one of my other siblings assaulted me as well. They were both boys. And so at a really young age, I was always super sexualized, I felt like, by men, because it wasn't just like my straight up family that was assaulting me, but there was like family friends and people that my mom would bring into our home that would like not necessarily assault me, but do very inappropriate things. Like me as a mother right now, I would never allow somebody to be underneath a blanket with my 2-year-old, 3-year-old child with a random man. Like it was things like that, like just really inappropriate. And my mother was also very like stereotypical, like Hispanic woman who believed that you needed to rely and depend on men regardless of how terrible they treated you. And it was all men that treated you this terrible. She used to drill it into my head that I was going to grow up to marry a man that was going to abuse me and like hurt me and not love me, and I was just going to deal with it.
Jeez.
And you know, for a while I believed her. I did, because for a while there I like absolutely hated and despised men. And finally, when I told my mother that my dad had raped me when I was about 12, 13, maybe even younger, I don't know, I can't remember the exact years or ages I was, but I finally told her, and she didn't do a single thing. She told me that, well, we need him. We can't survive without him. He's who pays the bills. He's who gives us food in our mouth. So there's nothing we can do about it, or unless you want to go homeless, which of course at the time I'd rather be homeless, because I was always afraid that my father was going to do it again, if given the chance.
When you get a little older and you're, you know, in high school, like 14, 15, 16, like this is also around the time that people start getting into relationships or anything like that. Can you kind of describe how your upbringing has sort of affected that part of your life as well?
Yeah, it actually affected it pretty severely. At the time, I didn't think that the abuse between my family like really affected how I dated men and what kind of men I dated. But I mean, clearly it does. I started dating at a really young age. I was like 12 when I had my very first boyfriend. And I know after dating, I realized that I was groomed all my teenage years by the men I dated because they were all significantly older than me. One of my very first boyfriend, I was 12, he was 16. Which when you get older, it doesn't seem like such an age difference. But I mean, 16 and 12-year-old, like what? I'm in middle school. Like, what do we have in common?
Right.
It's gross when you really think about it.
Yeah, that is definitely significant.
Yeah. And he was very abusive too. Like he would call me a bitch and a slut and a whore if I didn't text him within 5 minutes of him sending me a message. He was super controlling, and he obviously like would fondle me, and I was 12 years old. Like I shouldn't have been doing any of those things. And around that same age, after like we broke up, whatever, I started seeing this other guy who was 19. And he was my brother's friend, and he was obviously grooming me. He knew I was 12. He was really close friends with my oldest brother. And my oldest brother actually walked in on us, and instead of like, getting mad at his friend and being like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're almost a grown ass adult. They blamed me. And that's the same brother who also blamed me for my dad raping me, actually, too. It was just my fault. And he would also call me a slut and a whore. And, my mother would also too. Like if I was, just at the skate park skating like a kid should be doing, and she'd come pick me up, she would accuse me of sleeping with all the boys at the skate park. And so being friends with males throughout my teenage years was just very sexualized. And again, the people I dated very abusive men. And I got into serious relationships just too young. I about the age of like 15 or 16, I want to say, I got into a really serious relationship that lasted up until I graduated high school. And that one was also very abusive. And he also raped me. And he was my boyfriend. There was times where he would ask me if we could have sex, and I'd be like, no, like I'm really not in the mood. And he would beg me, whether it was like for 10 minutes or 2 hours, would sit there and guilt trip me until I would give in. And there was times where the lights were turned off and I would cry while he was on top of me. And it wasn't until afterwards that he'd be like, oh, I'm such a terrible person. I should have never made you do that. Like, I feel bad. I just forced you. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's okay. It's already done with. Like, there's nothing we can do now.
Well, we're so sorry to hear all of this. And I want to talk about the transition to motherhood. But I guess right before we get there, have you been able to escape this situation and sort of remove yourself from that environment and your family members?
Yeah. Actually, when I was about a month into turning 15, I was so depressed. I was so depressed. I was so ready to like end my life. And I would, so much so that every time I would cross a busy road to get to school, I would purposely not look both ways because I was just so done with life. One day I don't know, I to this day, I don't know what it was. I think I was just really lucky. I think my mom I caught her on a good day or something, but, I had convinced her to take me to therapy because I was like, I need to start somewhere. Accidentally, but on purpose, I had said something about being in a really abusive situation and that my dad had sexually assaulted me in the past. And of course, he's a mandated reporter. So he was like, okay, well, I do have to report this. And I was like, like, I'm going to get the shit beat out of me, but okay, like, I guess, like, do what you got to do. I'm ready for it. So I was like, you guys know anything about how to get into the foster system? And luckily enough, there was a social worker who worked with DCFS there. And she was like, yeah, actually, I'm a social worker and I work with them. Like, what's wrong? Like, why? What do you want to know? And I was like, well, I'm not just being abused by my father, but I'm also being abused by my mother. And I need to get out of this situation. And luckily oh my God, she's such a saint. She is such a saint because she was like, well, there's no proof, so I can't remove you, but I'll see what I can do. And sure enough, she did not let me go home that day. She actually put me in AT, like this detention center for troubled youth usually, but foster kids go there too if they don't have a place to stay. And so she sent me there and convinced my mom to send me there, so that way I could be punished. You know, she was trying to agree with my mom, so that way my mom would agree with letting me go that night, because she was afraid that my mom was going to hurt me as soon as we got home. And she would have been right. Like, my mom would have beat the living shit out of me if I would have gone home with her.
So you ended up at that center that night?
Yeah, I
and
did.
Did you ever end up back home again?
No.
Wow.
I was completely removed. My mom relinquished her rights after like a couple of weeks. Willingly, she relinquished her rights, and she thought that she could just like gain them all back. But that's not how the system works. Like, they were like, no, you need to go to classes, because no sane parent just gives up their child just to prove them wrong, you know, or right or whatever.
Right. Wow.
And
well, we're glad to hear that you were able to get out of that. So when did you become a mother? And are you in a relationship with the father?
Yes, actually. I met him about almost 4 years ago on Bumble, actually. We met on a dating app. And I just gave birth to my baby 2 months ago.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, we're still together. He is an amazing man. He's really what changed my perspective of men, actually.
Well, thank God, because that was like finally like a relationship that is working for you with not a terrible human.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is fresh. So 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Congrats. But do you remember the feeling when you found out it was a boy?
Yeah. I was so convinced I was going to have a girl. I even picked out a girl name. I was looking at girl clothes. I was just, I didn't know that I was kind of trying to convince myself that there was no way I was going to have a boy. But, you know, the results came back and found out I was having a boy, and I was completely devastated. I was confused. I was like, whoa, like, I knew that there was a possibility that I'd have a boy. Why do I feel this way? I didn't even know that my trauma was going to affect what I was having, actually. It wasn't until that next day that I called my mother, and I was like, oh, like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I don't want a boy, and I don't know how I'm going to handle this, because he's a boy. Like, he's going to grow up to be, the chances of him being like a rapist or someone who abuses women, or, you know, the chances are really, really high. And how do I deal with that? How do I navigate that? Because I can't change who he becomes. I can only do what I can as a parent. And, you know, he becomes who he becomes. And if he does end up hurting people, like, what do I do with myself? Like, I raised him. And so my mom, she's such a saint. So not my biological mom, my adopted mom ended up getting adopted. I just want to make that clear. Mm-hmm. She was just like, well, Myra, like, there's really nothing we can do other than just sit here and kind of wait till he becomes the person he does. And you're going to do what you can as a mother, and you're going to be a good mother, but maybe like you just need to go to therapy. I don't read it, like, because who knows how to like work with that. Like, you can't change the future. You don't know what's going to happen. So
what can you just describe that fear a little? Is it just based on, I mean, the events you just told us, and in your life, like, unfortunately, it feels like the probability of like men that you encountered ended up being abusers or rapists. Mm-hmm. And is that the fear that's just uncontrollable no matter what you do as a mother, that this boy that, you know, you love could become that person?
Yeah, I do think that it just, So I don't know. I had to kind of think about it for a really long time. I had to sit with it for a while. Because for a while there, I was super afraid, and I was like, what if I hate it? Like, what if I regret becoming a mom? Like, just the fact that I'm having a boy, like, is making me think about all these things. But I kind of sat with it for a minute, and I thought back to, well, okay, I know I don't want to turn out like my parents. I know that just that in it itself, that I don't want to be like my parents. I don't want to continue the cycle of abuse, comforts me, because then my kid isn't going to turn out that way. He's going to be loved and he's going to be cared for. And who knows, like, maybe the chances are going to be less because he is loved and he isn't abused and he isn't taught that women are just sexual objects. Because I think the men in my life were just not raised, or like it wasn't drilled in their head that women weren't objects. Like, women aren't just to satisfy you for the night or for whenever you please. Like, women are partners, and they're humans. Because the men I dated, so my therapist one time told me that we attract the men that we bring into our lives. And that was like the hardest pill for me to swallow, because I was like, well, I don't want to get raped. Like, what do you mean? And what I still can't really describe exactly what she meant, but I do understand it now. And I think it is just like, men are raised a very specific way. And luckily in our generation, because I am a young mom, I'm only 22. And I feel like our generation is finally starting to steer misogyny and like the idea of how women are just objects away. Like, we're starting to steer away from that kind of, picture of how we picture women and how we treat women. And so it's giving me a lot of hope that my kid isn't going to turn out that way.
Have you talked with your current partner about all of this? And are there like precautions or things that you guys have sort of discussed about how you're going to raise your child to try and prevent all this?
Yeah, actually, my husband just wants to set as like an example, like be an example for our child, because my husband is such a good man. He treats me with so much care and so much love. And like, I don't open doors for myself. While I was pregnant, I didn't do laundry, not once. I didn't cook any dinners. Like, this man treats me like a princess, and he just hopes that he can just show our child what it's like to truly treat a woman with care and love, when you love and care about them and appreciate them, and that this is how you take care of a woman. So he wants to lead by example.
Is this only 2 months in? Is this still kind of a daily struggle that you have? Like, do you feel like, or was there a time in the beginning where you wished you could have a girl, or have you sort of accepted that you have a boy and that, you and your partner are going to obviously try to set the best example for him?
Yeah, so I have accepted that I do have a boy, because I have a boy, so there's nothing I can do about it. And I like I said, I sat with myself and I was like, okay, like, this is what I'm going to go through. And if he does happen to, become terrible, and if he does happen to become a monster, then I can deal with it then. Like, that's future Myra's problem. That's not my problem right now. But I can't dwell on who he's going to become if he's only 2 months old right now. Like,
right.
Do
you fear that you'll be looking for confirmation bias? Because I was trying to research this a little before, and it isn't a topic that's discussed much, but there was some instances I found of women speaking about it where they've suffered severe trauma and abuse, and then there's sort of stages along the way, like especially a mother raising a son, like one day he will be bigger than you or stronger, or show, even throwing a tantrum when young, or throwing something, or being violent like children or toddlers do. But those can act as triggers for some of the women, where you try to, then have that like confirmation bias, or too much of a fear of like, oh no, he's going in the wrong direction, or his innate personality is angry or violent or something like that. Is that something you've thought of, or know, how you'll approach as that happens?
Yeah, I think those are moments where I would have to step away and let my husband take charge, because I am afraid that my trauma is going to stop me from being a good mother to him and handling situations like that the best I can. Because even just with my husband, like if he gets upset, like I get triggered because I'm like, oh no, like he's upset. I shouldn't, like I'm walking on eggshells right now. Like I can't do anything that's going to upset him more. Like I'm already that way with my husband. So I can only imagine that I'll be that way with my boy. Because I am pretty tiny too. Like I'm only 4'10". So my kid is going to be bigger than me pretty quick.
Right.
And and that obviously does scare me, because I've always been vulnerable. I've always been groomed. I've always just had men be abusive. So I do think about that a lot, but I think through more therapy, I'll find a way eventually to navigate that a little more. Like I'm still trying to work through all this. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just think working on myself, because it's not his fault. He's not the problem. My trauma is. So who knows? Like he could be the most sweetest, like most gentlest, like soft, kind person, and all my fear was just rooted in me, and all this, like just fear.
Guys, I have a question for you, and it's about sex. I know you guys are comfortable talking about sex on this show, so here we go. Could you confidently say that you are having the best sex of your life? Maybe some of you can say yes confidently. I think a lot of you would say no, but maybe majority of you would say you don't know. And isn't that something that you would want to know? Are you truly having the best sex that you could be having? Well, there's a way to answer that, and there is a way to increase your performance in the bedroom and give yourself a boost of confidence, and that is with Blue Chew. Blue Chew is a chewable tablet, and it delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but it is a fraction of the cost. And you can take them anytime, day or night, so you're ready to go when the action arises. The process is super simple. You just sign up at BlueChew.com. You consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you will receive your prescription within days. No going to the doctor's office, all online. It'll show up in discreet packaging, and you are ready to go. So you might be wondering, does it work? You might be thinking, am I having the best sex of my life? Here's the thing. You can try Blue Chew for free for a month, and you can find out, and you can see if it's a fit for you. All you have to do is go to bluechew.com, and you can use the promo code OPL at checkout, and that will get you a month free. All you have to do is pay the $5 shipping. So you can test this out. It's an awesome opportunity, and you could be having better sex. So try Blue Chew free when you use the promo code OPL at checkout. Just pay that $5 shipping. That's bluechew.com, promo code OPL. Receive that first month free, and you can visit their website for more details, important safety information. And as always, we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast.
So you are also at the point, I mean, it sounds like that you're like sort of accepting of the fact that I have a baby boy, but I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that he turns out, not abusive. So, I also was kind of curious, like when you first bring up all this stuff to your partner, what was his reaction? And was there ever any pushback, with this opinion that you have of like, I'm afraid, not opinion. It's, a real feeling of I'm afraid to raise a baby boy. Like, was there ever any pushback with any of those fears with your current partner or with anybody else in your life that you may have told us to?
No, so I haven't really spoken about this topic with any other person other than my husband, because I'm raising my boy with my husband. And no, he's super understanding of it, actually. My husband didn't grow up in the best environment either, so he understands to an extent why I'm so afraid and why this is such a big deal to me. He is very patient, and even though he might not fully understand, I still think he tries his hardest to know where I'm coming from. And sorry, what was the question again?
I was just asking if there was ever any pushback between, your husband, if he didn't quite understand, your fears about this, because I imagine, when this episode goes out and we talk about, or like, we're having this discussion, there will be some people of like, why would she be afraid of raising a baby boy? Like, you're the parent, you should be like in control or whatever. Like, some people may have that sort of opinion. So I was wondering if there was any of that going on between you and your husband, or with anyone else in your life that may have known. But, like you said, your husband seems to be very understanding, and, there hasn't been any of that. But I was just wondering if there was any of those types of discussions with anybody else.
Especially people who don't understand sort of the trickle down of trauma,
right,
and how it could affect that, maybe, where it is easy to say like that fear is irrational, or you're the mom. Yeah. Like Joe said, you're in control. You can raise this child. But and especially around people just get so up in arms about anything child related or parenting. Because, especially it's like, this is the greatest joy that you will ever experience. This person came from your body. And then, to openly say like, well, I have fears, or at the very first time I found out, I wished it wasn't a boy. Like, some people will never be able to wrap their heads around that. But like Joe said, these are very real feelings for you, all based on your life and what you've experienced. But I guess you kind of answered Joe's question. Like, I guess you haven't told a lot of people, but I guess with your husband, he has had a lot of empathy and patience and understanding. And it seems like, which is amazing, that he's working to kind of see this through the lens that you're seeing it as well.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And luckily too, like I said, I got adopted. So my adopted side of the family, that's who I associate with. That's who I consider my family. Like, I haven't spoken to my biological family in 8 years. I refuse to allow any kind of negativity or abuse or narcissistic people or any of that. I don't allow that in my life whatsoever. So I think that's another thing too. The people I have told are supporters. Like, luckily my mom's side of the family and my dad's side of the family, my adopted parents, like, they are amazing people, and they are so genuine and so nice, and they don't even try to like question the way I feel, because it's the way I feel, not the way they feel. Like, it's my experience. And so everybody so far that I have told is very understanding, because they're just understanding to begin with. Like, I was a foster kid, I aged out of the system. So they know that there's just a lot of things they don't understand.
Right. And I don't know how much of a purpose it serves to think this far ahead, but have you ever thought about a moment in the future where you tell your son your story?
Yeah. I think when he's old enough, because I don't want to scare him. I don't want to make him dwell on my life. Like, I feel like my duty. So this is kind of how I'm like also trying to navigate what if he becomes this way. My duties as a parent is just to make sure he becomes his own individual, and not just a little mini me or a better version of me, even just his own person. Because I'm like, as somebody who is making humans, like, eventually they're going to grow up to be their own person, and I should just help them navigate that at a really young age. And so I don't want to scare him, especially if I see that he is becoming and isn't becoming like a terrible person, but is becoming a pretty decent person. And like, you never know. Like, I'm sure people who are rapists, pedophiles, aren't born the way they are. They aren't like planning in the future that they're going to rape women and, hurt children. So I don't know. I just hope that he just has a positive mindset about life. And I don't want to scare him by telling him my story, but I do think eventually it's very important that I do. So that way he's very aware of how, treating women really makes a big difference in a woman's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. And, we just really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. And I'm sure this is what will be a lifelong journey from you, for you through, so many stages of raising your son and your son growing up. But we could definitely understand just the complexity of all of this. And it's such a range of really extreme emotions kind of all meeting at once. And I'm sure it's so hard to sort through that, where there is, probably a love that you haven't experienced because you just created this human, but that same love and joy also then brings out some of the biggest fears and the worst moments of your life. And you are obviously not alone in this. I think this is something that a lot of women have gone through and are going through. And it's kind of a dynamic, like we said in the beginning of the show, that I don't know how many people are talking about it. I don't know what's out there. We've talked to so many women, and it's hard to hear these stories, but so many women just on the show alone. And then there's so many others that we don't even get to that just come in through our emails. And we're just one platform that allows people of women who have gone through this sort of abuse and trauma and rape. And these are women who then go on to be mothers and raise children, and specifically raise men. So I do think it's important. And I know it's, you don't necessarily have answers, and these answers will come to you throughout your life, but it's just good to see, the place that you're in and the work that you're doing, considering everything that you told us.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a pretty difficult topic, I think, because I just think it's not talked about enough, because it's almost like hard to talk about why you even feel that way. Cause like you said, like so many people can be so dismissive. And sometimes it is scary to be like, hey, I'm afraid of my own kid. Cause people are going to be like, what? Like, you're kind of ridiculous. He's 2 months old right now. And I'm like, yeah, but one day he's going to be a full grown man.
Yeah. I think that some people also they think that their experience is everybody's experience. And I mean, everyone has a different sort of upbringing and different traumas or negative things that have happened to them over their life that end up shaping them. And when it comes to being a parent, I think all of those things they play into what kind of parent you're going to be. So everyone's style of parenting is, sort of different. And I mean, I think the internet specifically is a tough place to be for a parent, because it's like the most important job, the most pressure, and like super high stakes. It's a human being that you have to take care of. I know mothers personally that like got rid of their social media because they're like, every time I go on it, I feel like a bad mom. Like everyone's talking about all of the things you're not supposed to do, all the things you should be feeling, all the, whatever. But it's just not that way. I mean, everyone has different sort of experiences with that. And I mean, I could say my personal opinion, when it comes to this, like, of course, it makes sense that you would be scared of this sort of thing. You've had these things happen to you over your life at the hands of men. Like, why wouldn't you think that, or just be afraid of the possibility? Like, that's the possibility for anybody. Anyone could have a good upbringing and they raise their kid a certain way, and that kid ends up murdering somebody or ends up doing something. Like, of course, that's a fear in the back of everyone's mind, but it's more prevalent when you have the actual trauma happen to you in your lifetime, especially multiple times. So it makes sense why there would be this fear that you're like compelled to sort of talk about. And I think that this conversation is very helpful, especially if there's any either expecting mothers or people who plan on having children in the future who maybe have the same sort of fears that you do. So I think that this is very helpful to be honest about, like, yeah, of course, like, part of me is excited for being a parent, and I love my child, but at the same time, like, this is also very terrifying, and you don't have to pretend like parenting is like, yes, it's just all good, it's all great things. Like, no, there's a lot of fear in it as well. So yeah, like Greg was saying, we appreciate you coming on and being so honest, especially about something that must be really hard to talk about. And you said it yourself, you haven't really told a lot of people. So we appreciate, you letting us be a platform where you're going to sort of share all of this for the greater good. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think, cause it's just so easy to blame the parents when a child turns out like quote unquote wrong, you know? Like you were saying, like online, like it does. Like even I've just been a mother for 2 months and already so many things I'm doing is wrong, apparently, you know, to the internet. Um, and it's so easy to be like, well, where was his mother, or where was his dad, or you know, like he must have not been raised right. But like you can do everything you possibly can, and that's the mindset I'm trying to keep, and that's what's been keeping me going and not being so focused on who he's going to become. But I can be the best parent I can be, and I know I'm going to be the best mother I can, to my child, and just really have to take it one day at a time, because I just can't dwell. I can't do that to myself or my baby.
Yeah. Well, no, that's great to hear. And we're cheering you on and wish you success and joy and all the things that come with parenthood. But you did mention before the show that you're looking to, or I guess actively working on a book about this. So it seems like you do want to get the story out, you know, to even more people in more detail. Is there a place where people can find that?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be releasing it when I do finish it. On my Instagram, I am currently working with an editor. Her name is Lauren Cobcroft. She's really cool. She's made a few of her own books, like the pencil book or pencil case. I can't exactly remember, but she's a really good author. And she's working with me on writing it. And my Instagram is Myra101. And that is where I will be releasing it. But yeah, it's about this exact subject and how I'm navigating it, you know, as each day that goes by and as he's getting older, and how I'm dealing with that, and how it triggers me when something he does, like something he could do, will trigger a memory of a man hurting me, because it is very triggering to, you know, have a boy. So
Yeah, well,
yeah,
we'll drop that in the description too, so people can follow along with that journey if they want.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, well, thank you so much, and like I said, we are wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one. Thank you.
You too. Bye.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a tough thing to like hear, and it's like horrible, and obviously, like especially at a young age, like when you're that young and traumatic things are happening to you, like of course that shapes your life, and it's always like incredible to hear that things like that can happen to people, but they still find a way to be good, and to find something good, and you know, through therapy or whatever, you know, helps along the way for different people to get to the point where it's like, you know, I'm just so dedicated to making sure that I'm trying to be like the best parent that I can, and not like taking out of it. Because like, I think a lot of people, like they go through traumatic things, and like you said, the cycle sort of continues, and that's scary. And I know that just like keeps going and going. So to have somebody sort of break that cycle, like that takes like bravery and also just strength to be able to do that, because, you know, like I said, everybody goes through their own sort of traumas or negative things about their upbringing, some worse than others. And when you hear a story like this where it's very, very bad, and being able to just break out of that, and get to the point where you're on this show talking about how, like, you know, just being honest with your feelings of like, yeah, this is still scary to me that I'm dealing with this, you know, sort of thing. And there were so many examples of men just being negative towards me in my life. Like, of course that person would think like there is a very high chance that I'm going to, you know, that any man would be abusive,
right,
because that's all my experience, you know?
It's crazy. But no, yeah. And that's why, you know, we're grateful to be able to speak to these survivors on the show, because I think the way you put it is perfect. Like, they're typically the ones that are breaking the cycle in their lives or within their family. And that takes so much strength, and it's not brushing it under the rug and saying I'm good and pretending. It's the opposite. It's confronting it head on. It's coming on this show and talking about it for the first time for people to hear. Like, that's such a huge step. It takes so much courage. So definitely grateful for, you know, all the conversations with survivors that we've had.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if anyone out there would like to come on our show, hit us up. Our email is oplpodcast@gmail.com. Just send us your story and we will get back to you.
Yeah, we are always recording, even if it's between seasons. So hit us up there. We will read it, and follow us on social media at OPL Podcast on Instagram and TikTok, and support the show at patreon.com/OPL show.
Yep, that is all. See you guys next time.